Tigers get a commitment over the last 24 hours. This is one of the things that I personally don't like about recruiting because I like to pronounce people's names correctly, and half the time when I see a recruit's name, I got no chance. And so I'm about to give you two in this segment, and I don't know how to pronounce either one of their names. Jackson McGowan? McGohan? I don't know. McGohan. It feels like it might be McGowan because that's like a common name, even though it wouldn't be spelled phonetically right. It doesn't matter. He's a good tight end. He's 6'4", 235 pounds from Miamisburg, Ohio. Was committed to Cincinnati, and LSU has taken him away. And this is very much in line with what Brian Kelly wants to do. I always felt really good in the Ed Ogeron era when they went and got a big-time edge rusher. I thought he was very, very good at evaluating those players and bringing them in. Kaylavon Chason was a guy that you figured was going to be a star, and he ended up being a great, great player and a first-round pick. Same thing goes for Arden Key. Same thing goes for B.J. Ojulari. I mean, when he brings those guys in, you feel like they're going to be really good players. I feel that way with Brian Kelly on offensive linemen and tight ends. And you understand that Mason Taylor is in the boat and had a really nice freshman year. You understand that Mac Markway is in the boat, and you expect him to be a really nice player. And Jackson McGowan, maybe, depends on how you want to say it, is next in line. He's got long arms. He high points the football. I watched some tape on him. He's not an elite explosive athlete, but he's a tight end. You don't have to be. He does catch the ball with his hands. He does have a very long wingspan, and he does high point the ball very well. So this is a guy that Brian Kelly, Mike Denbrock, and his staff identified, and they wanted to get him into this class, and they did yesterday. So Jackson McGowan is now next into LSU's recruiting class. Hopefully, the next one, we get to another name that I don't know how to pronounce, with Javian Toviano, I don't know how you say it either. Apologies. But you know who he is by now. If you listen to this show or pay attention to the Tigers, he will announce tomorrow at 11 o'clock Central Time, and that's a big one for LSU. We have gone over this time and time again where LSU stands in terms of corners. They need depth in a big way. They need it from the high school ranks. They need it from the transfer portal ranks. We've talked about Javian Toviano. We've talked about Desmond Ricks. We've talked about Denver Harris. We've talked about a lot of different guys that may be potentially available to LSU. And Toviano is next up, and he could commit to LSU as soon as 11 o'clock Central tomorrow. So I wanted to mention that today because when we go on at 1 o'clock tomorrow, that decision will be made, and hopefully it is good news for the home team. The indications are that things look good on that front. When you read Toviano's actions, as Shea Dixon always loves to say, our guy from On3 Sports, this is where he's been the most, and he hasn't really been anywhere else in the foreseeable past, like in the recent past. So it feels like Toviano is a lean to LSU, but it's never done until it's done. In fact, it's not even done tomorrow, but it's a good start if you can get him in. Speaking of cornerbacks, Kamari Rogers has entered the transfer portal. Who is that? Maybe it sounds familiar. He was an LSU commitment for a time while he was a high school player. Ended up signing with Miami, played 1 year there, didn't play very much, and has entered the transfer portal. I don't know if he didn't play because he wasn't ready, if Miami had an extreme depth at corner. I don't pretend to be a guy who knows a ton about Miami secondary play. They weren't very good this year. I know that as far as the team goes, but they did have some players in the secondary. Maybe Rodgers is not the player that he was thought to be when he was a four-star recruit in high school. Maybe he is and just didn't get a chance. This staff certainly is familiar with him, so that's another name that you can potentially look for out of the transfer portal at the cornerback position. So, McGowan's in, Toviano tomorrow, Kamari Rogers in the transfer portal. Those are things to look at this point. Also, LSU, as far as just the way the ratings go, and this means a ton to some people and not very much at all to other people, and I understand both sides of the coin. I am one who very much believes in the evaluation that these sites and talent prognosticators put together, and if you're consistently in the top 10, you've got a chance to win conference championships and national championships. If you're continuously somewhere 18 to 40, you're not. That's just how that works. And so they get every single one right? They don't. Are they right more often than not? They are. And LSU got a little bit of a bump thanks to some of the sites yesterday. Zalance Hurd, now a consensus 5-star, 247 bumped him up, so everybody's got Zalance Hurd as a 5-star prospect. Of course, the offensive lineman out of Neville, who is part of a really, really nice-looking offensive line class for Brad Davis and LSU. So he is now a consensus 5-star recruit. And Deshaun Womack, who is a big-time defensive end prospect, got his 5th star on 247 as well. So Tigers at this point looking pretty good as far as the sites go. LSU on 3, which is where I do a little bit of work on the baseball side of things, is up to number 5 in the country. They've got 24 commitments. They've got 1 5-star, which is Hurd, 16 4-stars. 2 5-stars because they moved Deshaun Womack up. So the class is deep, and it's got some real eye catchers at the top. So Lance Hurd's a 5-star everywhere. Shelton Sampson, a 5-star on 3. A couple of the sites don't quite feel the same, but Deshaun Womack, a 5-star on 3. And you've got some really highly thought of 4-stars like Jalen Brown, the wide receiver, Dalen Austin at corner, big position of need, so that's a big get for LSU. Jackson Howard, edge rusher, is a 4-star across the board. DJ Chester, part of that offensive line class. So you get the picture. LSU's class is thought of very, very strongly right now. And this is still a time where we have to consider something we were talking about maybe once a week in the summer. This year in the state, LSU had a really uphill battle to fight. They were not going to get Arch Manning. Was not going to happen. They were not going to get a number of the guys at the top. Eli Holstein was not coming to LSU. He already saw Walker Howard on the depth chart. That wasn't going to happen. And you start looking around. Jaden Ausberry was not going to come to LSU. There was no pitch you could sell to Jaden Ausberry on LSU that he didn't already know. His dad played here and has worked here his entire life. He went to school on campus. You're not going to be wowed when you walk into the new football ops center. He's been there with Dad a bunch. Wow, look at this environment in Tiger Stadium. Yeah, I've been coming here since I was 5. So they were fighting an uphill battle in the state with some of the really top players. So for them to write at this point, and they're not done. Toviano tomorrow, maybe Ricks. We'll see what moves down the line. But the likelihood is they're going to be a top 5 class when it's all said and done. And that's a very, very encouraging thing. I don't think anybody really questioned whether or not Brian Kelly could put together a staff. I don't think anybody really questioned whether or not Brian Kelly has been a really, really good coach when he's a favorite in games. There are a lot of things that the track record shows you about what kind of coach that Brian Kelly has been. One thing that's not on his track record is jumping down into South Louisiana and swimming with the Sharks in the SEC in recruiting and coming out on top. Putting the fence around Louisiana, all these type of things that we talk about with recruiting, that's not on his track record. You know this. I know this is not new information to anybody. But by all accounts, and when you look at there's now really 4 sites doing this full time. On 3 is brand new to the scene, and people find cutting edge. 247 was really the most trusted evaluation site out there for 5-7 years. ESPN has put a lot of money into this. And Rivals is still around. And the consensus among them is that LSU's class is excellent. It's not like one says, yeah, you're 4th, and the other one says, well, look at this. Like, this is like the 21st ranked class. No, they all think this class is great, and it looks like it's going to get better over the next couple of weeks before the early signing period. So it's a really encouraging thing. All signs point to Toviano being in the boat, and then you got to go to the transfer portal and make things happen with your roster that were not things that we talked about 4 years ago.